Thank you very much. So these are some of the questions that I've often got asked over the years, or currently being asked on a regular basis from landlords. If my property is currently empty, can I still let it out if my property is sort of currently empty? So how can they let it out? So they're asking questions of how they can let it out. These are their concerns. If the tenant is unable to pay the rent, what do I do? The problem is being empty, so we'll have to pay council tax. Do landlords have to do repairs and gas certs? Can I evict a tenant if I have a court order, etc.? Can I serve notices on tenants? So by show of hands, how many of you have had those questions or presented to you and said, look, these are your concerns or problems, etc.? So I'll just cover the first one. This was if the property is empty. Yeah, this is during a COVID period, so that's why I think this slide's a little bit out of can you still let the property out? So of course you can let your property out, and we can find ways and find tenants for you. So I think these are the wrong slides, but let me just carry on. So some of the concerns that we get asked is the tenant hasn't paid their rent, so what can I do? Or if a tenant goes into a property, how can I protect myself? So this is the only business, property lettings, that you can take an insurance policy out to protect the rental income. So would you agree that you cannot open a restaurant or a bar or a shop and then insure against the rent coming in? Would you agree with that? So in the situation of landlord situation, we are in a very, very fortunate position because we know that for a couple of £100, we can actually protect the rent or any void periods. So in situations that we've had in the past, a landlord's come to us and they said, right, I want to rent my property out. And we say, yeah, get rent protection. And this is the cost. In order to get rent protection, you have to do the credit checks and all those sorts of things. So you do the credit checks, make sure the tenant is good, and then you get rent protection. So, as I say, it's the only it is a fantastic for us as landlords to be able to do that, and I think that's so important going forward with Reform Acts coming in and the tenant having more rights. I was reading something yesterday, and that was saying that the tenant currently has 8 weeks that they have to be 8 weeks in arrears or 2 months in arrears, and then you can serve a Section 8 notice to get the property back or start the court proceedings. Now they're proposing a 13 weeks of rent arrears. So it's not the first month, the second month, but it's actually the third month and even going into the fourth month that you actually can't serve a notice on a Section 8. So our arrears as landlords, if a tenant is bad, will increase. And of course, the insurance companies and the providers of these policies will know that, so they will increase the policy premium. But it's one of those things that we cannot afford not to get, because the rent protection plus the legals protects our business. So we can protect the top line income. So if you could just give me a 1 in the chat if you think that's a good idea to be able to protect your income, that would be great. So again, that is so important. We've had situations where tenant has stopped paying. We had 2 ladies in the property. They both fell out with each other. One left the other one there. Then she left. They had £4,000 arrears by the time that we went to court in the first month. Yeah. In the first month or second month, we were able to serve notice, and we were able to continue. So we were able to help that landlord get his rent arrears back, and the court fees were £1,000. So we were able to get his £1,000 court fees back from the rent protection. So when you look at those 2 things, total cost the landlord would have lost £5,000. But in this situation, because he had rent protection, he didn't lose a single penny. So he got all his rent, and then the time that the tenant wasn't paying, he got all his rent, and then at the end, they'd left a little bit of mess which came out of the deposit. Then he was able to get back into business. So I think that's absolutely fantastic. If you think it's fantastic, please put a one in the chat to say, yeah, I agree that rent protection is good. I'm not here to sell you rent protection. I'm just telling you how I am protecting my business. And I don't, if a tenant's been in there a long time and I know them and they've always paid, then it's little point in getting it, but there is a risk there. And with volume and etc., it will happen. When we go into like the next year, there may be more issues with tenants, etc., which in a one way is good because there'll be more stock on the market. And if you're ready to buy and you want to increase your portfolio, if it's single lets, HMOs, serviced accommodation, it's all fantastic because you'll have more stock to purchase. On the other side, yeah, tenants will have more powers, so that we need to look at how we protect ourselves. Any questions on that? Anyone want to raise their hand, make any comments? Yeah, Rick.
Evening, Sunil, and everyone else. Obviously, we're looking at this for our clients as well. Just as a landlord myself, do you think the insurers are going to hike up the premiums quite considerably in light of the new Labour sort of conditions from the Renters' Right Bill? Because obviously, if they're having to cover a lot more, the likelihood of payout is likely to be a lot more. It normally goes that way, doesn't it? So, do you think it's going to significantly impact the premiums from what you're seeing?
Yeah, I think so, because as soon as they go from an 8-week notice period on a Section 8 notice,
yeah,
to if it's 12 weeks, then it's okay. So within it's 3 months, but it's not. It's actually depending on the time of the year, it falls into the 4th rental period.
Yeah,
it's sort of, they might as well have doubled it from 8 to 16, but I think they were like a little bit cautious to think, oh, we can't double it, but we're going to make it more difficult. But yeah, I think their premiums will go up, but I still think it's going to be worth it because the loss situation of somebody not paying and you can't even serve a Section 8 notice for a long period of time, and then what's the court procedure going to be? So is that going to be longer?
but yeah.
So, yeah, some of the rents, I mean, as well in your area, on a single let, you're over £1,000. So you're looking at maybe, even if they do 2 weeks at £500, it's still worth it on a 52-week period. And that's the way I'm looking at it. There's going to be a cost to our business. But can you avoid it? Yeah. So any thoughts on that from anybody else or yourself, Rick? What do you think?
I think it's a very real thing that individual landlords and letting agents should be considering to protect it. We can't change what is coming down the pipe with regards to what Labour are putting upon us as landlords and investors, but we can mitigate the risk as best we can or minimise that risk. And it's a business decision. If the policy is £50 a month and that's too much, then don't get it. But equally, if it's £30 and that's a lot of peace of mind for the lack of headache of, like you say, soon racking up a £5,000 bill or arrears, then that may be something that you want to do. So I think it's a case by case consideration depending on what rent you're achieving and what cash flow you've got from that individual property.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I we go through and say, this year, are we going to be putting in policy here because we know the tenant, they have always paid, but you just don't know what their circumstances. But yeah, it is on a case by case basis. The other thing that landlords worry about, and just ignore my slides for a minute because these are not the right ones, and I'll get the right ones in a minute. But it is, how do they protect the property? So they're worried about rent arrears. So we say, look, the landlord, you can protect the property, protect the income. The other thing they worry about is, what will the tenant do to my property? Well, the inspections cover that. So if we're inspecting the property on a regular basis, then of course that covers that. So inspections are important. We found that when we were working, not from the office, but we were having tenants and we were dealing with them. We did less inspections, etc. Our properties came back in a worse condition than they do currently because of inspections. So above the office here, we have a flat. He's been in there 4 years. He moved out today. He actually moved next door because he's friendly with the guy next door that is a tattooist, and they spend a lot of time together. So he moved next door, and we were able to give his deposit back straight away within sort of a couple of hours. He sent me his bank details. We gave his deposit back. He'd left the property clean and tidy, but because we've been inspecting on a regular basis, so if you don't undertake the inspections, the tenant, you cannot keep on top of the tenant. The other thing is with inspections, you're looking out for things like beer bottles, rubbish, etc., etc. The beer bottles, we had one case where the lady was an alcoholic and the guy was a good combination. He was a gambler. And of course, the guy that was going to suffer was me in the middle because I didn't get my rent. But that was many years ago. But yeah, and then we got a court order. The bailiff turned up, and they were very clever. They let the bailiff. There were 2 bailiffs. They let the first bailiff into the property, and the sons were inside, and they locked the door. And the other bailiffs outside. They called the police, and basically then said, the police said, right, you won't be evicted today, but we'll come back in 2 days, and we want you gone. And that's exactly what happened. But yeah, the inspections are so important. Is there any other reason? Yeah, has a tenant has a right to refuse inspection? Yes, they do, and it's a great question. So thank you for putting that on there. Yes, they do. We give a lot of notice, so we'll tell them 2 weeks in advance that we're going to do an inspection, and then we'll confirm a near the time, and then we'll go and do the inspection. Now, as the landlord, we have a right to say we're going to serve 24 hours notice, and we will come in and, sorry, if you're going to be at work, can you give us authority? But the tenant can still refuse. So the tenant doesn't have to let you into the property. Now, frankly, if a tenant is refusing access, of course, that's going to ring alarm bells to all of us. What have they got in the property? What are they doing? Is it that they're subletting, which does happen? Is it that they're growing something, which again does happen? And all of those things that we need to be aware of as landlords and agents. There are ways around it. If a tenant is refusing, contact your local council, environmental health. They will write to the tenant to say, because they know that we've got obligations under Immigration Act to know who's in the property. Under gas safety, we need to gain access, and as I said, the safety of the tenants and etc. that we can gain rights. The easiest way to sometimes gain access is your gas engineer. Your gas engineer has more powers than anybody, because under the gas regulation laws, they can enter that property anytime, because if they believe they smell gas, or if there's a report of smelling gas or anything, because of health and safety, they can enter. Does that answer your question? And if there's any follow-up questions on there, yeah, that'd be good as well. So council tax. A lot of landlords worry about council tax. I mean, it's true. In Swale, we used to have a 1 month exemption, so the tenant moves out. We used to get 1 month to do the property back up and re-rent it. This used to happen in most councils. Most councils now decided that it's a good income stream. So the tenant moves out to upstairs today, as I said. Tomorrow they start charging me the council tax. So it's important to make sure the property is ready and you've got tenants lined up to move in, and so that this void period is lowered so that your income continues. In the new Reform Act that's coming in, they're saying that the proposal is that the tenant is giving 2 months notice rather than 1 month notice, and that's their way of saying, well, we're going to help the landlord now to get the property rented, so you've got a tenant lined up, so you get a 2 month notice period. But as you know, sometimes it's very difficult to get into the property and see what it's like, or there may be works. So yeah, thanks for the 2 months notice, but is it going to be as beneficial as we think it's going to be? Any thoughts on that? 2 months notice period, good idea, bad idea? Okay.
From my perspective, Sunil, I think, sorry, my son's printing something and the printer's right next to my ear, if you can hear that in the background, sorry.
That's okay.
From my point of view, I don't know that 2 months notice from the tenant side is necessarily a good thing, because generally speaking, if someone wants to move, I'm not one to want to hold them against their will, because that increases the likelihood potentially of, not paying in the last month and all the rest of it. And, especially if you've got a tenant that there has been a bit of a strange relationship where they've fallen into arrears or something like that, if you want them gone, let them go. Focus on getting the property re-let and not, sort of holding on for every penny that you can get, because, it's just a false economy, in my opinion. Get the property re-let. You've probably got an opportunity to bump the rent up. You're probably seeing this, Sunil.
Yeah.
And, you might not be able to, you're doing rent reviews and you're increasing your rent year on year, but you might not be able to keep up with the market where it's going so fast at the moment. So if a tenant does leave, then it's an opportunity to realign with the actual market expectation. I've just had this conversation with an investor friend of mine and saying, gone are the days where it's actually, a landlord wanted to keep a tenant for as many years as possible. That's still true, generally speaking, because it's an investment in the long term. But it does give opportunities to realign the market if it's, the rent has fallen a bit behind, perhaps. If you can increase the rent, let's say by £250, £300 a month, yes, you're going to have some turnaround costs of maybe, I don't know, 2,000 to 3,000 for a paint, fix and clean on the property in between tenancies, perhaps. But if you're getting an extra £300 a month in, next to no time, you've got that return on investment back again already. So it's not always a bad thing.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And if you could keep talking for a little while, that'd be.
You know me, Sunil. If I'm buying you some time, that's fine. Yeah.
It's absolutely true. Sometimes it's just getting back into business and not holding on to people. So yeah, I think that is really good advice. But carry on, please. If there's anybody who want to join in, then I can. Yeah, the presentation isn't going to make any sense until I find the slide. So go for it.
Rick, Sunil, I just wanted to say that I'm an absolute novice. I actually don't own any property yet, but I've got some ready cash. So I'm just here to listen and get some knowledge from you guys. So it's interesting to hear what you have to say. So I appreciate what you're saying.
We all started somewhere, Alex. So yeah, good for you for being on here. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereabouts are you based?
I'm up in Darlington.
Okay.
So I understand the property market here is pretty good. House prices are reasonable. And obviously I know the town as well, so I know where the good areas are. But yeah, just I guess to listen to people who've done it is, it's a start.
And what do you do at the moment?
I've got a tiling business, so I renovate bathrooms and do all sorts of tiling work. So
yeah,
keep me busy.
That's great. I think it's better. I'll come back to the slides in a minute, because unless I've got the right slides, it's not going to make any sense. So thank you for coming on, Alex. You're actually in the right place in terms of where you are, Darlington, where you are here, etc. So I don't know how you find us, but congratulations for being here. I was on Clubhouse yesterday morning, and the question, or a few days ago, and the question was, Monday, was, what is your best deal? What is the best deal you've ever done? And I know which my best deal is. And it's not the last one I brought, and it's not the other ones I brought. It was my very first property, and that was in Middlesbrough.
Right.
And I paid, it was 30 years ago, I paid £15,500, and the solicitors were £200, 100% mortgage. This was the day before buy-to-lets. The reason I tell you that story is that was my best ever deal, and not because of the money, because it got me on a journey. It changed my life, and it went from, me doing a day job to being able to go onto property. So I think the first one is the most important, because it gets you on the journey. So whatever you do, just get your first property. Yeah. As soon as you get your first property, it's easier to get the second one, because the first one gives you belief. I could ask you about tiling, how you started tiling, and then you went, yeah, it was hard in the beginning, but then it got easier and easier.
It's the first step, isn't it?
Yeah.
Was there out of interest? Was there a model you followed in terms of like, did you buy a doer upper and do it up and get renters in and refinance, or did you just flip a few, or what was your tactic from the start?
I didn't. I don't sell properties. We have an estate agency,
Right.
that sells properties, but my personal properties I buy and hold.
Okay.
One in Middlesbrough I did sell because I had two in Middlesbrough, but then I was moving around because of my job into different, like I went to Reading and South Wales and North Wales and various places, and they became very difficult to manage, no capital growth. So I did sell them, but I wasn't flipping. I don't flip properties. I purchase and I will hold for forever.
Okay.
I don't know if that's going to change now, because I've always said that I'm always going to buy and hold, and it's going to be a legacy, etc. Then I think how complicated it is, but it still beats a day job because.
Yeah, it's definitely from what I've been trying to get into this for a bit of time, and like just watching the way the country's changed or the world's changed. Like it seems like it's got a lot harder in the last couple of years compared to 5 or 10 years ago. Seems like they're really making it quite difficult to make money from property, But I guess, like you say, it's still better than working the 9 to 5 and sort of working for someone else, I suppose.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true, because if you're a tiler, if you're a surgeon, yeah, or if you're working with your hands, there's only a certain amount of hours, there's only a certain amount of things you can do. And my brother-in-law, he used to lay driveways and things like that. They have their own property business in town. My brother-in-law and my sister, and my brother-in-law 4 years ago became ill, and he had various stomach problems. Then he got cancer, etc. For that 4-year period, he's never had to work. He wants to work, but he's never had to work because the tenants continue to pay their rent. And as long as the properties are managed, then that's great. And he doesn't have to manage the properties because his sons will manage the properties, or they can get an agent to manage the properties. But no worry about finance, no worry about what's going to happen, even to the state where the doctor said, oh, we can't find a treatment for this, or we have a treatment, but it's going to cost thousands of pounds. I think the figure was 150 to 200. Yeah, we'll just borrow finance, or we can sell a few properties, etc. And I think when we get started, we don't think about those things. When I got started, it wasn't about that. It was about making £100 cash flow, and I wanted 10 properties so I can get £1,000 a month, and that's all my plan was.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I feel you. It's obviously it's a big long journey to get to that point, but like you've got to start somewhere. So here we are.
Yeah, brilliant. Dan, could you put the other slides on? Rick, if you want to come in, anybody want to come in? I'm happy to do that. It's open forum. So yeah.
Rick, what do you do out of interest?
Well, I've known Sunil, so we're kind of local but friendly competition. We're in different towns within Kent. So Sunil is more in the north of Kent, and I'm more central. Both been property investors for quite some time, myself about nearly 20 years now. But I'm a property investor primarily in residential, very similar to Sunil. I don't really sell stuff. I'm what we call an accumulator, so I buy and hold, generally speaking. Don't do a massive amount of flips or development out the ground or stuff like that. We do heavy refurbishments and stuff like that when we buy a smelly property and then turn it into something nicer. But generally speaking, it's just good old-fashioned, residential units. However, the time is changing a little bit. So I think there's a lot more discussion at the moment, especially at the moment, in light of what's going to be announced in the October budget, as well as Labour coming in and all the rest of it. There's a lot of people looking at potential alternatives. That doesn't mean they're going to jump ship and throw the baby out with the bathwater, but their eyes are just open to what else is out there and what's working at the moment. I think that's why, Sunil, would you not agree? Being in things like this is absolutely paramount. We've been in the business a long time, but we still learn new things. Just this week, I've been talking to some other people about a slightly different strategy, which I'm still doing my homework as to whether it fits for me or my clients potentially. But on the same note, I'm keeping my mind open to the possibility that there might be some good stuff. I think, generally speaking, if you could make the numbers stack up, there is always going to be a demand for basic vanilla buy-to-lets. The challenge at the moment, however, Alex, is getting the numbers to stack up. Certainly down in the Kent area, the yields are quite tight, really, for traditional buy-to-lets, because every man and his dog is looking for, you know, that kind of elusive first deal, little buy-to-let type deal. So I think where you are, the yields are stronger. So, you know, you don't have to put so much cash up in the first place in order to get a very similar rent to what we're achieving down here in Kent. So you're going to get bigger bang for your buck. You're going to get a higher return. It's as simple as that. But you still need to be selective. You still need to make sure you're doing your due diligence and doing your homework, making sure you're not buying a lemon or a dog, whatever you want to call it, you know, and working with people that know what they're doing. So thinking about how are you going to refinance the deal. So I'm seeing a lot of opportunities being brought to the table for me at the moment, but there's just not enough in it. There's cash flow in the deals that they would work to hold, but I've got no mechanism for adding value or refinancing mine or my investors' money back out of the deal. So it would tie up a lot of cash. That's not my strategy. You know, I haven't got, you know, £1 million just sat there doing nothing. I wish I had some days, you know. A lot of my money is reinvested back into what we do, and Sunil is probably the same. We use angel investment money, so we go to the market and we speak to high net worth individuals from time to time and you know, look to borrow their money and give them a decent return, because not everyone wants to be an investor, but some people want to be involved in investment. So they're quite happy to be a silent partner and just say, yeah, I kind of like what you're doing. I haven't got the energy or the hours in the day to do that, but I'm happy to give you 50 grand, 100 grand for you to go and give me a 6, 8, 10% return, whatever it is that investor needs. So work equally as hard on finding investment funds, speaking with the mortgage brokers to obviously get the mortgage money lined up based on your circumstances and what you can get. What I mean by that is, you know, coming back to what you were saying, Sunil, the first one is always the hardest, but it's always the sweetest, because once you've up and running, you're no longer a first-time investor. But being a first-time investor can sometimes go against you, because obviously you haven't got a track history, you haven't got experience, they don't know you from Adam, and you know, you might get penalized with a slightly higher interest rate or reduced panel of lenders that you can even go to in the first place. But that's just life, unfortunately.
You've got to start somewhere, haven't you? So yeah.
Exactly.
To be honest, it's me and my two friends. We figured put our heads together and you know, try and make something of ourselves. So I think between us, we've got about 110 grand to spend. So I'm just trying to figure out how to get the most for that. Do you know what I mean? Like, what are the options? You know,
yeah. So in simplistic terms, and it is very simplistic terms, you know, let's keep the numbers nice and round. You've got 100,000. You know, you can leverage, you know, 75% of the value of a property from a bank fairly comfortably these days. So straight away, you've got a portfolio of £400,000 thereabouts. Doesn't quite work out like that, because you're not just going to put the £100,000 into deposit, because you're going to need some money to do the property up and add value as well. So it spreads a little bit thinner. But you get the gist of it. And the key thing there is, that's all very well finding these great deals that cash flow and all the rest of it. There has to be a mechanism for you to get that 100,000 back out so that you can go again. Otherwise, all your money is going into that deal. Then what? Well, then what? You know, do you borrow some more from friends and family or other angel investors and this, that, and the other? Do you add value so that you can refinance it out? And these are all things that need to be considered as you move forward.
I think the model we like the look of is buying a place, you know, doing some work to it, getting renters in, and then refinancing it, taking the equity out, and then going again. Is what have been talking about. I don't know how you feel about that as a sort of way of doing things.
It is a strategy, and it has worked for many, many years. And Sunil has probably bought many deals as I have, you know, and Doug as well has got a wealth of experience. Sorry, I don't know all the other faces, you know, that are on tonight, but I'm sure there's plenty of other seasoned investors that have used that model time and time again. However, I would say it doesn't continue to work indefinitely. So we've got to look at other options. And what I mean by that is, you know, the prices of properties and people's expectation might become a bit too high. The cost of interest rates might be, you know, way too high for the numbers to continue to stack up.
Where does it stop though? This, like, is it just going to keep getting harder and harder until like it's actually not possible anymore? Do you know what I mean? Like
that is a possibility. Yeah.
What's the next step after that though? Who owns all the property then after that?
It's a possibility for this strategy. So doing it in that model that you've just described, you know, buy, refurbish, add value, that may not continue to work ad infinitum, you know, forever and a day. But some other strategy will be created by another investor, you know, and then that will be done.
Share the love then, because I feel like you know something.
Alex,
well, if you sign up to my package for £500 a month, you know,
yeah, Alex, if you just get started, yeah. If you just get started with what you plan to do, the opportunities will come, and you'll find the different ways. And one of the things over a long period of time, the laws have changed, everything changes. We just keep adapting, and next thing comes along. And you said, well, you know, what happens when all this stuff goes? It won't. There'll always be property. There'll always be, you know, we've got Lloyd's Bank at the moment wanting to buy up lots of properties. Yeah. Why are they wanting to buy up? Why are they, you know, sort of pushing to say, yeah, we'll take landlord properties on? Because they know that there is such a demand, rents are going up, everything is good. So yeah, we're still in the business, we're still active in the business on a daily basis. Rents have increased, etc. Demand's up, voids are down. So it's all positive stuff there. So yeah, I don't want you to put yourself out of it before you get started. That the market's going.
No, not at all. I'm just asking the question. Like we will keep going and it will happen. But it's just, you know.
Yeah,
I think just to summarise what Sunil's saying there, Alex, you know, he's got a wealth of experience and he knows what he's talking about. And we will always get stuff chucked at us, new regulation, new rules and what have you, that we have to sort of pick the bones out of and work it out as we go along. But that's it. We've been doing that for 20 years, 30 years in Sunil's case. You know, something else would come along and you go, oh, great. But you just kind of work your way through it and muddle on. I think, though, with my kind of logic brain, sort of my background before was mechanical engineer by trade. So I'm quite scientific and logic brain. The numbers do not lie at the end of the day. So work the maths out. Make sure you factored in, you know, as much as you humanly can into the deal. The numbers do not lie. So if a deal is saying it only makes £200 a month, but you've got to invest, you know, £300,000, it's not a deal. Move on. You know, stop looking at deals like that. You know, go and find something where the numbers do stack up. You know, if you could make £200 a month cash flow, but you only have to invest £10,000, yeah, show me 100 of them and I'll buy them off you tomorrow. You know, so it just depends on how much investment you need to put into it to get the return as well.
Yeah.
Like everyone, we want our money or our investors' money to be working as hard as possible, whilst at the same time trying to mitigate and reduce risk as much as possible.
Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Bob. Bob, are you there? Because I think you had some comments in the chat, which I'd love to get your view on.
Hi, yeah, I'm here.
Hi, Bob. You okay?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Sunil.
Good.
Long time no speak.
No. Could you tell us what your thoughts are? I think it was going back to the 2-month notice period, etc.
Well, I was just sort of asking trying to ask a follow-on question. What did I ask? The discussion was about the potential for landlords being a 2-month notice period being imposed on landlords instead of the 1 month. So, and I think Rick was saying, well, yeah, but there ought to be some scope for a business deal that says, well, okay, the tenant wants to go tomorrow. There's no problem that I can think of with varying the agreement. There's just one bit statutory, and well, the rest of it is a business decision and an agreement with the tenant. If they want to go tomorrow, then let them go tomorrow. I'd go with that.
Yeah, so what they're saying is that the law will say that the tenant, at the moment, the tenant in most contracts says I have to give 1 month's notice.
Mm.
And then they're saying, well, in order to sweeten the landlord a little bit, they'll have 2 months' notice. But of course, by agreement with the tenant, you could ask them, they could leave at any stage with the agreement with the tenant. But you couldn't ask for a 3-month notice period. That's the point. You could ask for a 1 month, but you know it has to be shorter than the 2 month statutory. The Welsh government under Rent Smart Wales do not have tenancies anymore. They have what's called a contract, and you get a contract holder, which is the tenant, etc. And that contract is the same throughout Wales. So you go on their website and you download that contract, and that's the contract that you're issuing with a tenant. And they've uniformed all this since 2022. And the reason for doing that is to say that it makes it easier for the tenant, because everybody knows, the tenant and the landlord knows what the tenancy says. Now, there are fundamental tenancy conditions in that contract, and then you can add in special conditions into the contract. Of course, those special conditions must be fair, but there are standard contract terms in there. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. And as I say, people will find opportunity. If somebody's like in our situation, if they want to leave, we do a year's tenancy, and if they want to leave, then we'll say, yeah, we'll market the property. As soon as we get a tenant, we'll release you. So we're not out of pocket, the landlord's not out of pocket, and it works really well. So yeah, if by agreement you could do anything, can't you, with a tenant, as long as it's fair, and that's the best thing.
We can do anything in business provided it's fair and both parties agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's just another business. Well, yeah, just another business deal.
No, it's not business to business, and they still have rights, and they're going to have clearly more rights. It's 240 pages of this bill, and there's a lot of detail in there. But yeah, so it will say things like we can't evict, we can't do certain things. If there's domestic violence in the property or certain things, like the tenants will have more rights, etc., etc. Now,
I was just going to pick up on that, Sunil. We have to remember, in the eyes of the government, and quite rightly so, you know, we are a business. Whether we act like it or not, whether we're a limited company, partnership, sole trader, it doesn't really matter. We are seen as a business, and we've chosen to get into this industry. Whereas the tenant, it is their right, their privilege, whatever you want to call it, that it's the roof over their head. So they are very much a consumer rather than a business to business transaction. So I agree with you to a point, Bob. You know, yes, with fair discussion and negotiation, we can agree whatever we like, but it fundamentally comes down to the tenant has way more rights than we do as landlords, unfortunately. You know, and we still have to respect that. But where it suits both parties, we do exactly the same, Sunil. So if a tenant wants to leave early, we say, yeah, that's fine. We're not going to hold you, you know, indefinitely to the end of your contract. There's no point. But you need to understand that you're not just going to walk away. So we will find a new tenant, and as soon as we have, we'll release you. And that's exactly the language that we use as well, Sunil.
Yeah, so that, you know, you've got 2 different locations, etc. We're doing the same thing, so it works because there's an industry practice that, you know, you don't want to hold a tenant, and it's basically common sense. You know, they're not going to pay the rent, they've moved on, or they've split up with their partner, etc., etc. Dan, are you able to show us the other slides? And it talks about the amateur and professional landlords.
Yep, I'll bring him up now.
Thank you. So Alex, this may be of interest to you as well. So, you know, so can everybody see the slide? Yeah. So basically, we looked at amateur landlords and professional landlords. Now, if you're here this evening, you're a professional landlord because you're getting educated, you're getting some tips, you want to improve your personal development and do the right thing. Again, we're talking about the government. The government want us to all be professional landlords. That's why they introduced the Section 24 in 2016 to say, you know, you will operate in this in a company, you will do these things, etc. An amateur landlord doesn't attend meetings. They don't invest in personal development. So the way they operate is very different to a professional landlord. Professional landlord will invest time, money in personal development so they can better look after their tenants. They will attend property meetings and Zoom meetings like this one, meetings with the local council, and we encourage people to go to any meetings that they can do. I think near where you are, Alex, there's a big meeting in the north, which by a lady called Michelle runs that. So if I find the details, I'll send them to you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
They attend trade shows, they read books, they listen to podcasts. Knowledge and information is vital in a changing market. And every year, the government have introduced something. You know, a few years ago, it was electrical certs, which so all of those things means that we have to keep abreast of things. As landlords, we can't turn around and say, well, I'm sorry, but I didn't do the electrical cert. And yeah, very sorry about the kids that are not there or the family, you know, had a fire or whatever. As landlords, we are deemed to know all the laws that affect us, and they could change as well. So we are just deemed to know, and there's a couple of hundred of them. So amateur landlords will find tenants in the pub being a generic, and we'll let friends and families, and we'll go, oh yeah, I've got this person and it's great. I've known Bob for a long time, or, you know, John, I've known for a long time, and it's great. We're gonna, you know, let to them because I know their son or their dad worked with me, etc., etc. Tenants, there'll be no referencing. They'll be just like, yeah, here's the keys. You know, we'll sort it out later, etc. Professional landlords will always find the most suitable tenants for their property, treating it like a business. So in this situation, the most suitable tenant, it's not the first person that comes through our door. It's often the third or fourth one, and we use options, and then we use referencing. And at the end of the day, it's gut feeling. If we've got two similar, yeah, it's gut feeling. And many times when I've not listened to my gut or told my team to not listen to their gut, that's when it's gone wrong. Use a letting, professional landlords use a letting agent. They use a secure tenant. They secure tenancy after having undertaken referencing, credit checks, employer checks, landlord checks, etc., etc. If you can't do any of those and you don't want your property managed, then there's still an opportunity just to do a let-only service. So our lettings manager today was on the phone, and the landlord saying, well, I'm just going to do this and I'm just going to let the property out. And she said, look, whatever you do, even if you use our basic service, just let us set it all up for you, and then you manage it after that because it's going to protect you. So that is the key.
Have the rules changed around vetting tenants as well recently with the new Labour stuff?
Not yet. There's no requirement to at the moment to reference anybody. There's actually no requirement to service to actually give somebody a contract. So you don't have to do it in a short hold tenancy. So you and I could say, yeah, you know, if you want to rent my property in Darlington, what I'm going to do is we'll have a verbal contract. Yeah.
Yeah.
Under the new rules in Wales, which I think they'll look at, there has to be a written contract. But there's no requirement at the moment. There's no requirement for referencing. There's no requirement for a contract. The only key requirement is that there must be the deposit, if you take one, that you protect it. And I'll come on to that in a minute. So that's the next point, is that they may let the property without taking a deposit in advance. We always take a deposit. It's a 5-week deposit, and we always take that deposit and protect it in a government scheme. Feel sorry for the viewer. They listen to their story. I've got no deposit. You know, can I do a payment plan on a deposit? All of those things are red lights, and we do not enter that market when people are like that. But yeah, landlords who are amateurs will say, yeah, I'm really sorry. They feel sorry for them, take the deposit. So we'll never agree a payment plan. We will always take 5 weeks deposit, which is the standard in the industry. It's actually the law. The professional landlord will always collect the rent deposit, and the words fees can come out of here, but in advance of the tenant moving in. Because once the tenant gets the keys in their hands, I'm sure people will here to confirm, especially Doug, will back me on this. they do have a personality change. So they can come in as one person and they'll leave the property, or they'll go into the property and they could change. So always make sure you've got everything in place first. I've talked about the deposit. So the deposit, amateur landlords won't take a deposit. They'll say, oh, I held the money in my bank. No, it has to be protected correctly. So we always require the requirements of law is that register the deposit in 30 days of taking it. And there's a little bit more detail now because there's a holding deposit plus the whole deposit, but protecting the deposit is absolutely key. This is the reason why, because if you're thinking, well, why does a deposit need protecting? The maximum penalty for not or incorrectly protecting a deposit is, as you can see there, if a deposit is 3 times plus the deposit and legal fees. So if you take a deposit of £1,000 and you don't protect it, and there are lots of websites and there are lots of stuff on social media saying, did your landlord protect your deposit correctly? Now the tenant should be able to go on to one of the deposit schemes and confirm where their deposit is. And it's not only the deposit paperwork and you protected it, but you must give them the prescribed information as well. So let's say you don't do any of that. It's £1,000 deposit that you have to give them back, plus 3 times. So that's another £3,000. Plus there could be legal fees of £1,000 for them to get you to court to give them the money, because they have to have a court order. So you could be down £5,000 because you haven't protected that deposit. As the law changes, this may get stricter, so that if you haven't protected the deposit, you may not be able to evict the tenant. But it's still the case at the moment. So if your deposits are not protected, it's looking at that deposit protection now. So you go back and you go through your tenants and go, oh yeah, that one, we missed that one, it was not protected. Just protect it now. That's the key. Any questions on the deposit before I click on? Okay. So amateur landlords would take cash for rent and deposit. It's just what they do. We have shopkeepers, we have other things, we have taxi drivers who have got properties. They run cash businesses. They'll just take the deposit as in cash. As a professional landlord, we've been a non-cash business for over 12 years. So that's even before the government wanted everybody to take cash. Everything goes through the bank. It's transparency. We can go back to records. And on the landlord side, it's the same. We had one landlord who said, "Oh, you were holding my deposit," and within an hour, we went back 7 years on it's a very quick search. We were able to send him the bank statement where we sent him the money back. Right? You don't lose money, etc., etc. So we never ever take cash in the office. We never take cash. As amateur landlords will take cash because they think it's the right thing to do. But it's all about transparency. We've got great records, inland revenue. Anybody comes, you can sleep at night. And then, yeah, this is a checklist. Any questions on that bit? That was quite a lot of detail.
Put this on low audio.
Around the 2% mark. But
Let's turn it down if you like.
The lady with the iPhone, I'll just mute her. Yeah, any questions on bits and pieces that we've talked about this evening generally, or specifically on this?
So there's a question there from Rebecca in the chat, Sunil. What if the tenant's never asked about the deposit? Who is checking that all the deposit is kept under government supported deposit account? Well, it's your responsibility, either the letting agent or the landlord. But ultimately, even if you've got a letting agent working for you, it still sits with the landlord. And this is a key thing. Letting agent is there to protect you in many respects, and we will, of course, look out for our clients. But on the same note, the buck stops with you ultimately. If there's, I don't know, a license application that's not completed correctly, or a deposit that hasn't been registered correctly, ultimately it affects you and your business as the final landlord.
So yeah, I agree. Rebecca, it's a fantastic question, and thank you for asking that. So what happens if the tenant never asks about the deposit? So let's say they paid you a deposit, and it's your duty as the landlord to ensure that you do everything correctly. The onus is on the landlord and not the tenant. Okay, so all of this, we are being policed by the court. So EPCs, the electrical cert, the gas cert, and the deposit, and how to rent guide must be issued at the start. So those 4 documents must be issued. What happens, Rebecca, is that if you ever need to evict the tenant, that's when it comes to light, because you go to court and you say, I need this tenant evicted from my property, because as we've seen, an amateur landlord can very easily let their property out. Anybody can let their property out. They don't need a letting agent. Anybody can do it. But when they come to evict that tenant, and that's what we need to look at. Not saying we want to evict all the tenants, but let's say it goes wrong and you need to evict the tenant. The judge will sit there, and on the forms that you fill into the court, it will say, what date did you issue the gas cert? Is there an electrical cert? Is there an EPC? Where is the deposit protected? Okay, and they can check, because they've got a computer in their office, they can check that they can go onto land registry and say that you are the owner. They can also check the deposit. So there is a checking system in place, and it's very clever because it doesn't check every single one. It's only the ones that have the issue. And of course, at that time, the landlord cannot evict the tenant. So unless the judge is sympathetic, or they may say, okay, if you give the deposit back, or if the tenant then gets smart and then they say, okay, we want to make a claim against the landlord, then the slide that I showed before with the penalties then comes into force. This one here, then it's the deposit plus the 3, etc. Rebecca, please feel free to open up and contribute, because I think, yeah, if there's any question there, that'd be great. Did that make sense?
I feel like basically if you don't follow the procedure and do the right thing, you don't have a leg to stand on if it all goes wrong. Is that right?
That's it in a nutshell. Yeah, basically. So yeah, you got to do it properly at the outset.
Yeah, like most things.
Yeah. It's a bit like a divorce, you know. God forbid, you never want it to happen, but when it does, it's a bit too late if you haven't got the paperwork and everything in order. You can't kind of do it, or dare I say, a death. If you haven't got power of attorney or some kind of will in place, it's a bit too late, because you can't really rectify it after the event. You know, it's too late. So do the homework and get the things in place up front. It will save you a lot of hassle if, God forbid, you need it further down the line.
And it's not, although this sounds a lot of information, it's not that complicated, because it's just the process. We're saying, you know, we need this, this, and this. We need 4 things before we let a tenant. After referencing, so we're going to issue a tenancy agreement. We're going to issue them with a gas cert, electrical cert, how to rent guide, protect the deposit, job done. So it's not that complicated. But the key is, if you miss those steps, then that's the issue. I go back to Rent Smart Wales and the Wales government, because they've looked at all this, and they did a 5-year, they got solicitors to do, or the Law Society did a 5-year study on how they should operate. And what they've done on their website is that they actually give you the templates. They say, oh, this is the checklist that you need to follow for your tenant in order to make sure that you've given them all the right paperwork. Oh, this is the contract you use. This is the notice you served. So for a landlord, on one platform, they've made it so much easier. And I think it's already tried and tested for the last 5 years, and I think England will take the similar stage. If they do, it'd be really good, because everything will be uniformed, and you can go on the website. It makes it easier for everybody. Jane has also said, hi, would you let a property to a tenant with a CCJ record, drug addiction record? I wouldn't know, Jane. There's so much demand out there. We spend a lot of money on Rightmove, Zoopla, etc., and we do not need to take tenants with CCJs, drug addiction, anything that doesn't mean that they will be in a tenant-like manner. I'm not in that business. I'm not in the business of, looking after tenants with needs, because I can't do that. Not because I'm not caring, but I'm just saying that I'm not that person. There are lots of landlords out there who are the counsellor for the tenant. They are their social worker. They are every person that they need to be. They'll even take them shopping and all things like that. I would say, Jane, you do not need to take you do not need, if you've got a nice property, you've got a good product, you don't need to take tenants with CCJs, and I wouldn't take tenants with CCJs or drug addictions or anything like that. So, you know,
people have died in a second wave of explosions.
Pam, can you mute your?
I'll do it now.
Okay, there you go. Okay, so
Yeah,
TV
so-
in the background.
Yeah, so why, Jane, I'm interested. Why did you ask that question in terms of CCJs, etc.? Because there's, if somebody's got a CCJ, somebody's gone out of their way to make sure they've told everybody. So that's one of the checking processes we have. Even before they get to referencing, we're asking them on the telephone, do you have any adverse credits? Do you have any CCJs? Is there anything that's going to stop you renting this property, etc.? So, yeah, is there any reason why you were thinking about CCJ records and drugs? Okay. Rick, did you want to come in quick, and then I'll?
Yeah, just to reiterate what you're saying, Sunil. Yeah, we have the same checks and balances. Our negotiators will ask them outright in the early stages of making an application. We will do referencing on you. Do you have any CCJs? If they say yes at that point, it's kind of almost game over, because not because we're discriminating, but because they won't pass our tenant referencing checks. And if they don't pass our tenant referencing checks, we can't necessarily offer the rent guarantee insurances and stuff that you're on about, Sunil. But just to add to that, I don't know if you're looking at it at the moment. We do a lot of HMO rooms, as you know, Sunil, in shared houses. We are looking a lot more at the reposit, sort of zero deposit option. In simplistic terms, rather than taking a maximum 5-week cash deposit, the tenant pays for like an insurance premium effectively of equivalent to 1 week's rent. They never get that money back, but it gives the landlord protection up to 8 weeks. Okay, so it can be an interesting product to give a bit more protection in the current market. And we're seeing quite a high uptake in that at the moment. And the company that we use, they're also offering, if you've got a traditional deposit with no rent arrears on that tenancy at the moment, you can convert it across. Are you seeing that, Sunil? I don't know if any you use that at all. But that's another thing to protect our market at the moment, alongside the sort of rent guarantee, a bit more deposit in the first place, protection.
Yeah, no, we're not. We just 5-week deposit. There's so much demand, sort of. I mean, we've got properties down as Dover and things like that, Stoke-on-Trent, and everywhere we look, it's not just in Sittingbourne. There is so much demand. There are landlords who will be exiting now, so it is a good time to purchase as well, because some landlords go, I was thinking of retiring, 5 years time, but maybe this is a time I'll enjoy my life. I don't want to get into all the paperwork and etc. Mr. Parker, John, can you unmute and help us with your question? You'll always learn something from John if he's there. Are you there, John?
Yeah, sorry, I've just unmuted. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Could you help us with the question and the answer?
Well, AWAB's law. Has anybody heard of it?
No.
Well, it's a new responsibility on landlords. If there's any complaint by a tenant of any mold or damp issues, then it puts quite onerous responsibilities on the landlord to get it sorted without excuse. I don't know the full details, but I'm aware one of my clients he's suffering under it already. He's got a very, very difficult tenant who frankly is there's all sorts of resident issues. He's almost creating the problem by his lifestyle. But unfortunately, legally, the courts are being very sympathetic towards him, and my client is suffering accordingly. So it's something you all need to read up on and be aware of.
Yeah, no, I hadn't come across that, Trent, but I know, again, just looking back at what Wales, I've only got 2 properties in Wales, but I could do some continuous education, because you can't operate in Wales unless you're on their database and you have to do the trainings. There was a lot of stuff on there about damp as well, but so I'm sure that's come in, but yeah, I haven't researched or anything. So thank you for bringing that up, and I'll go and have a read of that as well.
Yeah, all of you get on Google straight away.
Excellent. Rebecca, you've got another question there, which is great in terms of, is it cheaper to buy and rent a property under a company rather than under your own name? You just need a bit more information. It depends on your circumstances. So on a company, yeah, you're going to, it's going to cost more accounting fees and things like that, but it depends what you've got in your own name and where you're going. So if you're first starting out, yeah, your first property may be okay in your own name, but it's at the moment, because of the tax laws, it's better to buy in a company. That's a general rule, but it does depend on lots of factors. So if you want to give us more information, then that's great. If not, if you reach out to me, I'll put you in contact with our accountant or somebody, and they will also be able to help you. So yeah, Jane wasn't able to come on. Franklin, if you're there, please feel free to unmute. We have HMO experts in the room, so they'll be able to help you with that bit. So please feel free to unmute and ask a question.
Hello, can you hear me? And maybe
yeah, just a little bit louder would be great.
Yeah, just it's not only about HMO. I was just thinking at the end of the year, if you collect several deposits, let's say like 10 different deposits from different places, should be this taxed, or how to organize this to be part from some income at the end of the year, if the tenant is still in the house, so they didn't move.
So if I'm understanding your question correctly, is the taxation on deposits. The deposit always remains the tenant's. So it's not your deposit, it's the tenant's deposit.
Yes,
so
yes, but
yeah, go on. So the deposit always remains the tenant's, and it's protected in a government scheme. So it never hits the end of year taxation. It can be shown, I think what you're saying is it can be shown on the accounts. So we hold some deposits because of the scheme that we use, my deposits. So we hold some of the deposits, but they're held in a separate client account, and it's shown on our accounts that this money doesn't belong to me or my company. It belongs to the tenants. So I'm not sure if that's what you're getting at, but there's, at the end of the year, the taxation, there's not on income. It's not income.
Yeah. Just I forgot that. Yeah. Thank you. It was clear. Maybe also another question to Rebecca's question. Is it possible to transfer your own property to your own company, for example, as a gift, not as a sale, and then just pay maybe this transfer kind of fee, or it should be always kind of sale?
There's a thing called market value and arm's length, so that if you're doing anything, you must be able to show that it was, you can't just gift it through. Do you mean your residential property?
Yeah, residential or commercial, like all.
Yeah, I don't believe that you can just gift it to your company. I think there must be a legal transfer that goes in, stamp duty paid, etc. Unless anybody has done it before, I'm happy for you to come in.
I would tend to agree with you, Sunil. You can call it what you like, but I think HMRC will have a different view on it. Anything that is transferred from individual ownership to a limited company or a LLP will probably, highly likely, attract some kind of stamp duty, land tax, or other kind of taxation at the point of transfer.
Yeah, brilliant. I agree with you, Rick. So just coming back to that question, Frank, the deposit is never income. So it's not taxable, and the intention is for it to go back to the tenant when they leave, or it pays for rent arrears. At that stage, it can become income if you're taking it off the rent, or it can become income at the stage where you take that money in order to do repairs. But let's say you take £500 from the tenant's deposit, that becomes income, but you've got to spend that £500 to put the carpets back in the property. So it cancels each other out. That makes sense. But yeah, I wouldn't treat deposits as income. You'll just end up paying more tax. Yeah, I've covered John's. Thanks, John.
I think Courtney further up responded to about John's question about AWAB's law. she's sort of right, and it is changing, I think, is the general. So AWAB's law, very simply, was AWAB was a poor little child that basically died of long-term damp issues and respiratory issues due to mold in the flat. It was a flat that was under the care of a housing association, I believe, John. I think it was. And originally, AWAB's law came into place into housing association environment, and they had, I think it's 28 days from an incident being reported to sorting it out, basically. And you have to respond in very tight timeframes and what have you to sort things out.
I think it's actually 14 days, and they have extended it to private landlords. It's not just housing associations.
Yeah, it was coming down the pipe, and I think it's now definitely coming down the pipe. And so that, you know, it's one of the things they still need to thrash out the exact specifics of what the timeframes are and all the rest of it. I think that's the bit that's ambiguous at the moment. It's coming definitely, but it hasn't been completely finalised with the detail. As many of these things, you know, often come that way. But yeah, we will have a responsibility as a letting agent or a landlord to sort these things out in a very quick time frame. Now, the issue I think you alluded to, John, is whether it is truly a damp issue, which is a failing of a building and something inherently wrong with the fabric or design of the building that is causing these issues, or is it a lifestyle thing where the tenants have got 15 drying racks, no heating on, even though it is a good heating system and it works fine, but they choose not to put it on because they can't afford it or whatever. That then becomes a lack of ventilation problem due to lifestyle. And that's where it's really difficult to prove who's right and wrong. And this is where you might need to get environmental health involved. So we actually had this where a tenant went to environmental health in a property in Folkestone that we manage, and I was actually the landlord for this particular one. I don't mind saying this. And they were trying to do one over on us, basically, and get us on an environmental health issue because they were about 3 months in arrears. They didn't want to pay their arrears, and they were just trying to drive a wedge, basically, in the conversation. Long story short, the environmental health officer came out and he said, "I'm going out to inspect your property." I said, "Great," because I wanted it to be an unbiased conversation. And there was a minor issue, a slight defect in, there was a crack basically in a waste pipe that was in a wall that was undetected, basically. So it was a very difficult thing to find. We put that right. But the bigger issue was the 2 fans that were in the property for the bathroom and the general sort of background ventilation. The tenants didn't want them on because they used electricity and they were a little bit noisy. So the environmental health officer sent them quite a short letter that said, "Sort it out," basically, because they were just trying it on. So you can get the environmental health officers to work with you if you know, are not avoiding your duties. And we had provisions there, so we had decent ventilation fans. They're just choosing not to use them on this particular occasion.
Well, you had a very helpful environmental health officer. The guy that the guy in Croydon, who my client has been working with, has come down very much in favour of the tenant, even though this tenant is having all-night parties. We believe he's filming pornographic films at night. He's upsetting all the other tenants in the block, but he's shown that there is mold growth on his bedroom wall. I went in there and did a report saying that there were wet clothes drying on the radiator, air bricks had been taped over, bathroom fans weren't working, and still my landlord, this guy is about 4 months in arrears or 5 months in arrears, and still my client is having major problems.
Yeah, it's unfair and it's unjust and it is very frustrating. But you just have to ask yourself the simple question some days where you say, you know, am I doing anything wrong? No, I'm not. And you can't get angry about it or bitter. You just have to be professional about it and put your case forward. Does it always work? No. Sometimes it goes against you. That's not right, but that is life again, unfortunately. Sometimes it goes like that. So,
well, my client is in his 80s. He's always been renowned as being a very fair and reasonable landlord. All the tenants love him. This bloke's taking the mickey, and it's making my client very ill. He's on the point of breakdown, and that's
unfair. Yeah, that's unjust.
How bad it can get.
Yeah, and this is where you want whatever professional report you can get. As you say, even when you provide that, sometimes that's not good enough. So on a similar but different vein, we had a case where a tenant was AWOL. They just disappeared off the face of the planet. Don't know what happened to them, to the point that we reported it to the police because it was a little bit mysterious where this tenant just disappeared. Never showed up again. So we went down the process of, serving an abandonment notice, and then to be official about it, we got official repossession of the property just to make sure that there wasn't anything going to come back to bite us. I turned up at the court, but the tenant didn't. On this particular case, my business partners had served the notice for the court application, but they couldn't attend because they had other family commitments, whatever. So as equal business partner, I went there, but the judge wouldn't listen to me because I was not the person whose name was on the piece of paper, even though we were all equal business partners and shareholders within the business. And you go, how does that work?
Who was it that said historically the law is an ass?
Mm.
And unfortunately, I'm finding that more and more the older I get.
Yeah, I'd say it's not to spread doom and gloom. It's just to say sometimes it is a little bit unfair and unjust. We just have to take a deep breath, count to 10, go, okay, in this particular case, it didn't really matter too much because we kind of just naturally moved on. But that was a potential business risk that, if that tenant had resurfaced from somewhere, we would have had to honour his tenancy and sort that out. So yeah, it can be difficult, but I think it just emphasizes the reason why you need to be talking to professional letting agents like Sunil, who's got a wealth of experience in the industry, speaking to your landlords groups and coming on meetings like this, as you said, Sunil, because it helps you keep up to date. And we all learn new things, don't we, all the time?
Yeah, absolutely. I learned from John this evening, from you, from others. So even the questions are fantastic. So it makes me think about what's there. Alex, I just want to cover your question before I go to Clive. And Clive, if you can unmute in a minute, that'd be great. Do you get more good tenants than bad? Yeah, absolutely. We could not, we have more good tenants, but you only hear the stories of the bad tenants. And there's probably 5 bad tenants that keep moving around a lot. But, we get a lot of, we are very, very blessed. Yeah, the amount of tenancies we have, the amount of people we house, etc., etc. Some tenants have been on our properties for 20 years, and some tenants, apart from the inspections, we don't even hear from, etc. That's not to say we don't do the repairs or anything like that. We have systems in place. We have our own maintenance guys, so we will do everything we can. But we do not want to lose tenants, and majority of the tenants will stay. We have hundreds of properties at the moment. We've got one case of where the tenant is going to court. Even during COVID, everybody paid their rent. So, it is fantastic. Clive, could you unmute and just help us, because I think that's really good advice there, that what you're talking about, the monitor.
Hello, yeah. We went to a property meeting, something, I think Helen organised it, something to do with Gravesham Council or something like that, landlords forum or something. And there was a guy there from ACO Alarms who do the smoke alarms. And he said that there's like a small unit that you can actually get that lasts for 10 years. And it submits data to a recorder that you can have in the attic, which then tells you which rooms are damp and gives you a certain amount of data. I'm not sure how good it is or anything about it, but he was obviously trying to sell his system, but it sounded good at the time. And I've got the guy's card, but obviously you can buy it online or anywhere else.
Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. We've got extractor fans in some properties. They're like 30 or 40 pounds, but we put £100 extractor fan in, and it makes no noise, and it monitors. And some places you just need that. So fantastic advice there, Clive, and I hope Helen's good as well.
And the other thing we actually had, after we got rid of our tenant, we had the local council environmental health guy round, and he actually from Swale, and he actually bought their brand new damp specialist around with him. And he was saying basically what you're saying about the fans, by putting I think he calls them DMEV fans, constant running in bathrooms and kitchens.
Yeah.
And apparently they last for years and are very silent.
Yeah, and the cost is low, so it's well worth doing. So yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Any final
And
questions?
the other thing he did mention as well is positive input air or something like that, which you can get, I think, about £300 or £400, and it actually pushes air in at roof level from the attic, and apparently that helps as well. So it was just the information we got when we was there. How good it is, I don't know.
No, it's good. It's good for you to share, Clive, as well, because it's all those experiences. Any final questions? Because it's going to wrap up in a few minutes. Just feel free to unmute and just ask the question, and then we can go for the last question.
I've got questions now.
Yeah,
Is there a community? Is there somewhere I can sort of ask questions and speak to you guys online, like a Facebook page or something? Or
so Dan, who helps me here, he's just put in the chat. There's a link there to a WhatsApp group.
okay,
And the WhatsApp group then tells you about the meetings. It tells you about these Zoom calls, etc. And yeah, you can join the community, and there's a lot of people on there, so they'll be able to help you. We had a guy called Martin who's local. He was in Kent, and he's moved up your way. So he's done really fantastic over the last 8-9 months. So he's saying, "I'll move up there, put everything." He's a builder, carpenter. He put everything in his van and moved up. My number's on there. So if you want to make a note of my number, and if you send me a message, I'll add you to the WhatsApp group. There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of groups out there. There's a lot of trainers out there. Whatever you need, just do the research. Like Clive was saying earlier, do the research. John was saying, do the research on whatever you do. We run free sessions. If we're in a room, if you ever come down this way, anybody's welcome to come into those as well. But we run, these Zooms are once a month, and everything's free. So, okay, thanks for joining us, Alex. Yeah, really great questions, Rick. Thanks for all your input, John, Clive, Bob, Dan. Thanks for everything. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and we will see you very, very soon.
Thanks, Sunil. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Dan.